Today is July 18th, 2020. My name is Anthony Villanueva. I'm interviewing Juan Garcia for Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Mr. Garcia, this interview will be placed in the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection at University of Texas, Austin. If there is anything that you do not wish to answer or talk about, I'll honor your wishes. Also, if there is something that you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consent. So I'll be asking you a series of 5 questions. Please answer yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree to each one of the questions. Voces wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs or other documentation at the Benson Library at University of Texas, Austin. We will retain the copyrights of the interview and any other materials you donate to Voces. Do you give Voces consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Benson Library?
Yes, I do.
Do you grant Voces copyrights over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree to allow us to post the interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
If any one of these questions is no, then the deal is off. But so far you're doing great. We have, once Voces receives the request from a journalist, do you wish to contact our, who wish to contact our interview subjects? We will deal with legitimate news outlets only. Do you give your consent to for us to share your phone number or your email with journalists?
That's fine. Yes.
Okay. That concludes that. So Juan, to start off, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and about your life.
Okay. Well, I'm the middle child of 3. I grew up or was born in Elgin. For the first couple of years of my life, I was living in Rolling Meadows. And maybe around the age of 5, my family was able to find a home here in Carpentersville, Illinois, which we then all moved together. Well, at that particular house, it was a very, very busy, house. There was 3 families, and it was, with like 23, 24 people. Then from there, my parents were able to save up enough money for a small home. Ever since then, we've been, low-income family, but have been blessed with the basic needs, thankfully, to my parents. Both of my parents are immigrants or have migrated from Mexico, but very hardworking parents. And through the help from them, I was able to finish high school. From high school, I then enrolled into Elgin Community College. And from Elgin Community College, I was balancing working part-time, full-time, and managing my payments with the community college because I had to pay everything out of pocket. I then, with a few years at Elgin Community College, went on to the University of Illinois, and then graduated with my bachelor's in molecular biology and cellular, and that was just about a year ago. And so now I work in one of the hospitals within my community.
Juan, you mentioned that you worked within one of the hospitals in your community. How did you come about? Was the hospital employment your first employment, or was there something before that?
There was something before that. I took an accelerated course, which allowed me to get my certified nursing assistant certificate in 3 weeks. And from there, I got a job offered at one of my clinicals, um, which is really close. It's located in Hoffman Estates. From there, it was a nursing home, um, and then I found a different job, same type of work, nursing facility, and I has ever since I was a youngster, I always wanted to work at a hospital, and so then I did apply to one of the hospitals within my community, and I've been very happy with the hospital that I work at.
And what is the hospital that you work at now?
It's one of the Northwestern regions, and so um, I'm a nursing assistant there as a tech.
Mhm.
Basically, kind of like the second-hand person for the nurses.
Um, could you move a little to your left? One?
Left?
Your left. Your left.
Oh, my left.
Your
Okay,
left. Yeah. A little bit more.
a little bit more.
I want the full benefit of your presence in this recording. That's
Okay.
perfect. Okay, good. So once you, when you were at the nursing home, tell me a little bit about your duties at the nursing home.
Some of the duties that I had at the nursing home were particularly take the ADLs of the residents that I was responsible for. If there was any abnormal of the residents, such as maybe having a bloody stool, or maybe they were vomiting, they had a high temperature, things of that nature, I would have to report it to the nurse. Any complaints or anything like that would be directly to me, and I would have to address it to the nurse or the administration. One of the other duties that I had was upon admission for the residents, I would have to take, their weight, their height, things like that, get them comfy or comfortable, I meant, and then any kind of needs that they wish.
Okay. While you were at the nursing home, did you come in contact with any COVID patients?
No, not at the nursing home. There was always the assumption that maybe somebody with a high temperature had the COVID-19, but they always came back negative.
Now that we mentioned COVID-19, when did you first come to hear about COVID?
It was I was watching the news, and I remember specifically it was about something happening in China with this pandemic, this virus, a lot of people getting sick. And then it progressed a couple of days. I was still watching the news, and it seemed like as the day progressed, it seemed like less and less people were out in public from China, respectively. And so then it didn't really occur to me that it was going to really transfer or get over here into the United States. But that's when I first officially saw it and kind of asked myself, what, how can the United States, have something like this? Or what would United States, what kind of approach would the US take if this was to happen?
And about what time of the year was that?
That was, maybe early February, late March.
Did you think at that time that it was going to be something serious?
No, not at all. I really thought it was just going to be them. I felt really sorry for them, and I thought, like, how can this happen, or what are some of the precautions that they can take? But for me to ever think that something like that would come to the US, if you would have asked me, I would have said, no, that's like impossible for the US to even get something like that. But, that's different now.
Well, you've mentioned how your initial reaction to this was. Can you tell me about your parents, your family at home? How did your parents react to the COVID?
Oh, it was different. To be honest with you, I would come home, I'll tell them about all this, science and the news and things like that. Specifically, my father, he would think that this is some sort of joke. So like a setup from the government, you know, from the viewpoint of the politics. But as we kept seeing the news, a lot of major things kept closing, such like, the NBA, the baseball season of the was canceled. The the university starting online classes. What was the major thing? Casinos were off. Then it started to really get into, uh, well, specifically my parents starting to take the pandemics more seriously.
You mentioned your father. How about your mother?
My mother, she believed it, but she didn't know how to go about it. She knew that it was something real, something that we can all get it, and it was really at that moment kind of unknown for her to see and how one really gets the coronavirus. But little by little, I was able to kind of convince her, inform her that this was real, that we need to, take action and really limit ourselves to the public.
And what type of employment do your parents have? And did the COVID impact their employment?
Okay, yes. So, my father, he works at a factory making glue, big large amounts of glue. But even though his job was impacted, meaning that less hours were offered for employees. So particularly to give you an example, he would get, or the company would get maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 orders of some sort of, glue. With the coronavirus, the company was only getting 10, 13. So it was a major, major hole in it. So he went from working 5, 6 days to now only 3 days. My mom, on the other hand, she has a manager position at one of the fast food franchises. And the way that she was impacted was they had to put all these like plastics and, like kind of like walls. Her dining room was closed. She now had to wear like face masks and, bring the face mask into the conversation. I told her about wearing a face mask into the public. She thought I was crazy. She thought I would not do that. And then, now we find ourselves in that settings where we do have to wear a face mask. So now she wears face masks. But as far as her hours, she was not really impacted by shortening of hours, but just the different environment settings did impact her.
And did both of your parents wear face masks now when they go out in public?
Yes, they do.
And your father realizes the seriousness of this situation?
Yes, it took a while,
Okay.
but he does. Often at times he kind of walks into the store and forgets all of a sudden that he has to wear a face mask. So he has to walk, back to the car and get the face mask.
Yeah, like most of us. I'm always forgetting. Anyway, did anybody in your family, or do you know of anyone that contracted COVID?
I don't know anybody specifically from my family and friends, but I do know, like, let's say I have a friend or have a family member, and they know somebody that has either passed away from coronavirus or had a high temperature, all the symptoms of coronavirus, but they they didn't really have insurance to go to the hospital, so they passed away with all the symptoms of coronavirus, meaning they had a coronavirus, but their occupation didn't allow them to go and get any help.
Does anybody in your family or acquaintances, uh, do they have any pre-existing conditions?
You know, one of the conditions that runs through our family is diabetes. So I know one of them was, you know, anybody with like shortness of breath or disease or something like that could be affected by it. But really, I think my father, you know, who was diabetic, might have been the one person, and you know, maybe my grandfather would have been too.
Do you or your family followed the quarantine when it was imposed very strictly in previous months?
It started lightly. It was personally kind of just me following the precautions. My father, um, you know, he's almost he's 53 years old, and so he had never really seen this before. So it was really shocking for him to even have to wear a face mask, or he thought, you know, after 2 or 3 weeks of the pandemic, it was all going to be gone. But you know, as we all know, it got extended. After being extended, everything was still shut down. So it was very hard on both of my parents, specifically my father, to get into it. But we all follow the precautions. Um,
We've spoken about your parents. Uh, how about your brother?
my brother, he's a chef in one of the casinos. He was impacted because he was mm, basically laid off because of the coronavirus. So you know, since it has started, or since like March, he's been without work. Um,
Did, was your brother able to receive any assistance from the government grants to big corporations and businesses?
yes, both my brother and my father were able to get a benefit from, you know, some of the benefits that were offered due to the pandemic. My brother has been receiving the unemployment, or the benefit from that part, and my father, it was later in the months that he was offered from his own work the option to go into unemployment, but still work the few hours that he's working at the moment. My
No.
mother,
Go ahead.
um, she was getting a small stipend from work. So basically, she was getting, you know, 10% of the sales from the fast food franchise into her, you know, check at the end of the biweekly. So that was a little bit of the benefit that she was getting.
Do you have any relatives in Mexico that you communicate with or your parents communicate with that have been affected by COVID?
Most of my father has, um, or half of the half of my father's family is in Mexico, and we have stayed close in contact with them, and we have heard news from them. But luckily, nobody has been affected by it. Same type of scenario is happening in Mexico, as far as, you know, the distance, the precaution, the face mask, everything like that. Speaking on the same subject, I do have many aunts, since it's a big family, as I was telling you from the beginning. And I do have one or two aunts that have taken the precautions so heavily that they're not really coming into close contact, or if there's like a family gathering, she's one of the many, that doesn't come because she's scared or she's taking precaution for herself, for her family, things like that.
So has COVID has impacted the ability of your family to gather regularly the way.
In some cases, but for the most part, within my intimate family, it has really came into a positive. Us as a family, we are no longer going out. We're trying to cook here at the house, trying to see what ways we can all hang around, whether it be a barbecue outside or just talking, watching the news together, things like that. If you were to ask me, has coronavirus impacted our family in a positive or negative way, I would say in a positive way, because we have, as a family, come together more, have socialized, and feels like we have connected with each other more than ever.
Has the COVID changed the habits and practices when you leave the house? Is there a difference from before COVID or now?
Everything seems to go back to normal as before, but when it was first beginning and I was leaving early in the morning to my job, I saw that if I was able to count 10 cars on the street, it was a lot. In the morning, I would average about seeing maybe 5 cars going to my job, coming back, same type of deal. Not many cars, not many people out in the public. Somebody asked me, was I intimidated or did I have a different approach going into, one of the hospitals within my community? That I have any second guesses or anything like that? And to be honest with you, I was at the beginning, but within the first week or first 2 weeks, I noticed that my hospital, or the hospital that I work at, had all the protective gear needed to fight this pandemic, this coronavirus. So we had all the N95 masks, the gowns, gloves, everything like that. Every employee was wearing a face mask. Everybody was taking precautions. Your temperature was taken upon entrance. So within the first few days of my job, it made me feel not to worry too much, but at the same time, I felt safe going to work.
Now that we've covered your family and your first employment at the nursing home, you told me that you work now at a Northwestern facility.
Yes, I do.
How long have you been working there?
I've been working there now for about 3 months.
And where is it located?
It is located.
How far away from your home is it located?
Half an hour away.
And what are your responsibilities there?
My responsibilities are to take care of the patients, the safety of the patients, EDLs, which is the vitals, and just making sure that every patient at the hospital feels human. What do I mean by that? Sometimes we forget that we're at the hospital, or they feel like they're being dehumanized or something because they're at the hospital. So it's my duty to make them feel more human by, having a conversation with them, checking their vitals, seeing if there's anything abnormal, whether they came back from a procedure. There's certain things that I need to do. So for the patient's care.
And what are your hours of work?
We do 12 hours, 3 days a week. It's only either days or nights, but I particularly work the day shift from 7 in the morning to 7:30.
And how many patients do you interact with on a regular shift?
On a regular shift, I am responsible for 8 patients. Yeah, sometimes it's less, but the norm is 8 patients.
Have you been tested for COVID?
Myself, I have not been tested for COVID-19. The hospital did do like some sort of research with the antibodies.
Right.
So they would choose some of the blood to see how my immune system was with the coronavirus.
And with your duties at the hospital, have you been in contact with any COVID patient that you know of?
No.
How big is the hospital where you work?
It is a trauma 2 hospital, and it's 5 floors. Busy hospital,
Okay.
but there's obviously bigger ones. I think as far as patients, I think we have the max of 150 to 120. Every room is privately,
Yeah.
only one room per patient.
And what towns are adjacent to the hospital?
There's McHenry, Woodstock, Algonquin, Huntley. Those are, the few that I know of.
Those are considered suburbs
Yes,
of Chicago. And do you feel safe at work?
I do. I went in not feeling the safest because it was a hospital, but after a few days of working there, I knew that I felt safe.
And do you have enough PPE?
Yes, we do.
Has your Mexican background helped you in your employment?
Yes. Even though it is, how can I say, I'm bilingual in Spanish and English, and so I know that we have specific translators or machines that are able to translate many languages. It has come where I can interact with some of the patients, or have a better connection with the patient and take care of them more because of my background.
Have you ever been afraid of contracting COVID?
Yes, I have, to be honest with you. You know, nobody really knows, or I guess, a lot of patients come in, and sometimes, not everything goes according to plan as far as, they enter the emergency room. From the emergency room, they go up to the floor that I'm working at, but maybe they haven't been tested for COVID-19. Sometimes they have a high temperature, and I ask myself, is this, patient positive or negative? But as the day goes, as many days have passed, every day we're taking different precautions, and I am safe at the hospital, or I feel safe at the hospital.
Do you feel that at any point in the future, this COVID pandemic is going to subside and things get back to normal?
I asked myself that question a few times, and I really think that the normality that we saw before the COVID-19, when will we see it again? And my question, or my answer, will be, I think we're going to see normality in about 1 or 2 years. I think there's going to be a second wave of COVID-19, and perhaps maybe the lockdown is going to come back. But in order for us to go back to normality, where we don't have to wear any face masks, we can go to the pools, go to the gym without wearing a face mask. I think that that time will be maybe within the next year or two. I do hope it's sooner, but you know, thinking back in March, who would ever thought that 2 weeks was going to be enough? 2 weeks got extended to 4 weeks, 4 weeks to many months. So if I go according to the past and I do a little critical thinking, I think that normality will be within 1 or 2 years. I think really the only reason or the only way that it can come sooner is if we really find a vaccine for the coronavirus.
What prior to the pandemic, you lived your life a certain way. Do you think that you will ever be able to have the freedom that you had before after the pandemic subsides?
I think so, yes. But there's still going to be maybe for example, you know, one of the criteria in order to go into the university or go into some school or something like that was before it was maybe like tuberculosis or some of the shots that you normally would have in the vaccine. But now I think they're gonna add on the coronavirus and be like, do you have the vaccine for the coronavirus? It's gonna be one of the precautions in order to enter one of those particular fields.
Okay, not to specifically touch a political theme, but are you satisfied with the way the state of Illinois has responded to the COVID pandemic?
Yes, I think Illinois took the right precautions at the right time and started locking down, started shutting down different businesses, casinos, universities, things like that at the right time. I don't think, maybe one can say we could have done it earlier, but we didn't really have something to tell us or something to alarm us that we could have done it before. And maybe we could have done it before, but the U.S. had never seen anything like this, since the influenza in 1919 or 19 before the world. So I think it was hard for us to kind of guess that it was going to come, but luckily we took action and we shut everything down. But I'm satisfied with the actions of from Illinois.
What about the federal response?
I think there could be a little bit more done by the federal. I'm very satisfied with some of the actions from the government, specifically stopping, the some of the loans. So I graduated last year, and after 6 months, you're responsible to make payments. But now with this pandemic, there's no jobs, and you have to make payments. And one of the benefits was that got extended for 6 months. So students had the luxury not to make a payment without any interest until September.
Okay. Is there anything that you'd like to say that we haven't touched on?
No, I think we touched different parts of the interview, different things about my life, and with the pandemic. The biggest takeaway for me was when somebody really asked me if I felt safe, getting a job at the hospital, and as I repeat myself that after 1 or 2 days, I felt safe working there. I knew that we had the right protective gear. Everybody was taking precautions. There was no visitors allowed. It really made me safe to go to work, you know.
Keeping in mind that this interview will be accessible in the future to your children and your grandchildren, is there any message, any thoughts you'd like to memorialize?
Not that I can think of at the moment. I mean, no.
All right, that's good. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out to share your thoughts. And as I said, we'll come back and go over this, make sure that everything is the way it is, the way we talked about. Thank you again, and have a nice day.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me, choosing me.
Okay.
And it was a pleasure doing this.
Okay. At the end, I'm going to call you again.
Okay.